He was only a cleaner, invisible to most, moving silently through polished halls that weren't his own. But when the lights went out and the world forgot him, he refused to stop dreaming. In the dark, with nothing but scraps of paper and fading hope, he studied, fighting for a future no one believed he deserved. Until one night, a millionaire walked in. What happened next would challenge power, expose prejudice, and leave everyone questioning what justice really means. For most people, the cleaner was just another shadow in the background, someone who appeared at dawn and disappeared long after the offices emptied. His name was Samuel, a quiet young man in his early 20s, carrying more weight on his shoulders than most could imagine. By day, he scrubbed floors and emptied trash bins, working tirelessly in spaces built for others' success. By night, when the building grew silent and the last footsteps faded, he stayed behind. In those dimly lit corners, Samuel opened his worn textbooks, pages smudged and bent from years of use. He studied by the glow of a flickering bulb, or when the power cut off, by the faint light spilling through a window. Every page was a fight against exhaustion, every word a step closer to the future he dreamed of. Becoming an engineer, building something lasting, something his family could be proud of. But while Samuel's determination kept him going, the world around him wasn't always kind. To most, he was just a cleaner, defined not by his dreams, but by his uniform and the color of his skin. Few stopped to ask about the man behind the broom. Fewer still believed someone like him had the right to chase something greater. And yet, night after night, Samuel refused to let go. The silence of those offices became his classroom. The dark became his companion. He thought no one noticed, that his struggle would remain unseen. But one evening, as he bent over his books, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. He wasn't alone. What happened next would shatter expectations, forcing everyone to confront a truth many tried to ignore. The footsteps grew louder. Samuel straightened in his chair, heart pounding, the words on the page blurring as shadows stretched across the floor. He had been caught before, told to leave, warned that cleaners weren't supposed to linger. But tonight felt different. When the figure stepped into view, Samuel's chest tightened. It wasn't just a supervisor or guard. It was Mr. Harrington, the millionaire owner of the building. A man Samuel had seen only in passing, always dressed sharp, always commanding a room. Now his eyes narrowed as they locked onto the scene, a janitor out of place, hunched over books instead of buckets. Samuel rose quickly, his hands trembling as he closed the battered textbook. He braced himself for the words he had heard too many times, accusations that he didn't belong, warnings to stay in his lane. Harrington's silence was worse than shouting. His gaze lingered on Samuel's dark skin, the uniform that branded him as help, and the pile of study notes scattered across the desk. The tension in the room was suffocating. Samuel muttered an apology, already expecting the outcome. He had worked long enough to know that people like Harrington rarely saw beyond the surface. In their eyes, Samuel wasn't a young man with ambition. He was a cleaner who dared to step into spaces not made for him. And then came the moment he feared most. Harrington's voice, low but cutting, "What are you doing here?" Samuel's throat tightened. He wanted to explain, to tell the truth about his dream, his late-night battles against exhaustion and circumstance. But before he could speak, Harrington's words twisted sharper. "Stealing electricity? Using company property for yourself? Do you think this is acceptable?" The accusation pierced deeper than any insult. Samuel's body froze, his heart aching at the assumption. To Harrington, the sight of a black cleaner with books in his hands couldn't mean education, it had to mean theft. The silence stretched. Samuel swallowed hard, fighting the urge to protest. He had been taught since childhood that raising his voice, showing anger, could cost him more than just a job. So he stood still, caught between humiliation and despair. But Harrington wasn't finished. He circled the desk, eyeing the textbooks as if they were contraband. "People like you," he muttered, almost to himself, "should know their place." Those words stung more than the threat of firing. Samuel had spent his life proving he belonged, clawing for scraps of opportunity. Now, in this single moment, he was reduced again, not to his efforts, not to his dreams, but to a stereotype. Still, he didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply lowered his gaze, knowing one wrong reaction could spiral into something worse. Then a pause. Harrington reached for the textbook, flipping through the notes scrawled in the margins. His face hardened, unreadable. Samuel's chest tightened as he wondered, would the man toss it aside, call security, or worse? The seconds dragged. Every sound in the room, the ticking clock, the hum of the building, felt magnified. Samuel clenched his fists, ready for the words that would end his hope, crush the fragile path he had built in the dark. And yet, they didn't come. Harrington looked up, his expression shifting ever so slightly. Something flickered in his eyes, confusion, disbelief, maybe even recognition. Samuel couldn't tell if it was the beginning of mercy or the calm before something far more devastating. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in as Samuel stood frozen, his future dangling by a thread. Harrington's grip tightened on the textbook, its worn cover bending under his fingers as though it were evidence of a crime. His voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. "You don't belong here. People like you. Don't rise above this." The words echoed, each one heavier than the last. Samuel's chest burned with shame, but beneath it pulsed something fiercer: anger. He had swallowed insults his entire life, but hearing them now, from a man who had everything while Samuel fought for scraps, felt like a final blow. Still, he said nothing, because he knew a wrong word could end not just this job, but the fragile thread holding his life together. Then Harrington stepped closer, his face inches away, the power imbalance unmistakable. "I should fire you right now. Call the police. Tell them I caught you trespassing, stealing, whatever story I choose. Who do you think they'll believe?" The threat was more than words. Samuel had seen it happen before. Lives torn apart by accusations built on prejudice, truth buried under assumptions of guilt. His palms grew slick with sweat. He wasn't just fighting for his job now. He was fighting for his dignity, his very safety. The silence that followed was unbearable. Samuel's eyes flicked to the books on the desk, symbols of everything he dreamed of, everything he worked for. He thought of his mother, who told him education was the only way out. He thought of the countless nights scrubbing floors, only to spend his last bit of strength chasing knowledge no one believed he deserved. And then something shifted. Harrington's gaze lingered on the pages, on the complex equations scrawled in the margins. His jaw tightened, but his expression wavered. For the first time there was no disdain, only something else. Surprise, maybe even doubt. Samuel held his breath. In that moment, the question burned hotter than fear itself. Would Harrington destroy him, or finally see him? Harrington stood there, still holding the book, still staring at the notes that told a story far louder than Samuel's silence ever could. Slowly, he set it back down. The tension in the room didn't vanish. It shifted. Samuel wasn't fired, wasn't arrested, wasn't dragged out as he feared, but the moment left a mark, one deeper than any punishment could. For Samuel, it wasn't just about surviving that night. It was about what the encounter revealed. That even in his most private struggle, the quiet act of studying, of trying to carve a better future, he could still be reduced to suspicion, to doubt, to a man who didn't belong. The weight of prejudice was always there, ready to crush him at the very moment he reached higher. He kept his job, but the memory lingered. Every time he opened those books again, he remembered Harrington's words. He remembered the threat, the assumption that ambition wasn't meant for someone who looked like him. And yet, those same words hardened his resolve. Because Samuel knew this wasn't just his fight. It was the fight of countless others whose dreams were questioned, whose worth was doubted before they ever had a chance to prove it. The millionaire walked away unchanged in that moment, but Samuel didn't. He carried forward with fire in his chest, determined not just to rise, but to prove that the barriers placed before him were never his to own. And that's the truth at the heart of this story. Racism doesn't always come with shouting, violence, or headlines. Sometimes it comes quietly, in an assumption, in a threat, whispered by those with power. It lives in the disbelief that someone like Samuel could be more than a cleaner. This isn't just one man's story. It's a mirror reflecting a reality too many still face. The question is, How many more dreams must be dimmed in the dark before the world learns to see them in the light? Because Samuel's fight is not over, and neither is ours.